the hand is worthless. Now, it's what's called a stachoma. A stachoma. She's taught not to read the second the. It's normal. Absolute 95% of people, 19 out of 20, the other 20. I always say the 20th one's a reading teacher. Yes. Now, and it's funny how once in a while you pull out an audience and they'll read that correctly and it ruins the whole overhead. And so it's fascinating that sometimes we say things, we send out memorandums, we give things to students, and we assume they all are going to read it and understand it the same. They all, of course, read it. It's all that I hand it to them. Of course everyone understands it, right? But indeed, there's stachomas out there, and some people don't see things the same as other people. I want you to count the number of F's on this page. Some of you have done that. If you've done it, don't fix your neighbor. It says, finished fires are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of many years. Very simple, one sentence, just count the number of F's. When you're done, you might jot your number down on your yellow sheet of paper or whatever. You have that? Clock is ticking. Okay. We done with that? Good job. Okay, write your number down. I'd like everyone to participate if you would. And I'm just going to ask you for the total number of F's. Very simple, no tricks, no games, just give me the total number of F's. Let's everyone raise their hand now. Total number of 1, raise your hand. 2, raise your hand. Well, we got a couple. See, some of them go like this now. I'm not sure that's a hand raise. That's kind of a wave. That's a, you're very nice, yes. Now, total number of 3, raise your hand. Very good, excellent, good job. Total number of 4, raise your hand. Oh, these people, look at this, it's strange. Total number of 5, no, come on. Total number of 6, oh, give me a break. Total number of 7, 2 through 6. This is how wars begin. We all read the same page, one sentence. How in the world can we mess that up? Come on now, I teach Algebra 1, they all know that, it's simple. Come on, I teach 3rd grade math. They tell me they don't even know how to add. What's the matter with these kids? I hand them out a flyer. We all read the same thing, and we got 3 through 6. Now, I could do this exercise again and show it to you. Again, the only trouble is that 3s and 4s don't raise their hand quite as high. And actually, what we find is that there are 6 F's there. 1 in finished, 1 in files, 1 in scientific. And of course, we all see 1 in of, 1 in of, and 1 in of. Moan time. Mona, they're moaning. Now, again, what I want you to go away with here. I'm losing this group. Okay, I better stand up here now. Okay, now, again, what I want you to go away with here is simply the knowledge that different people see things. It's another stachoma. Our eyes overlook them. It doesn't see it. No tricks on that. Simply the way it's typed on Macintosh, even off the right end, it happens every time. And 50 to 75% of people will only see 3 F's. And it's the way we are. It's the way we are. And that's why I say individually, one person by one person by one person. Now, in terms of some things you can do, questions you can ask your students or each other. Number 1, simple question, the name I like to be called by. That seems like a trivial question. That seems very trivial, the name I like to be called by. Except I had 20 secretaries in a room. I was teaching them these relationship skills. A secretary who had been in the district for 10 years. Everyone knew Marianne. She'd been in this job. Everyone loved her. She was a great secretary. And I wanted to have them develop their relationship skills about working with people because they're such powerful people. And indeed, Marianne announced to all these other secretaries that she prefers to be called Roberta. Now, I can't tell you why Marianne likes to be called Roberta. But I can tell you this, is that when I would go and call her on the telephone and say, "Good morning, Roberta," I could hear a smile on the other end of the line. I can tell you we had a new teacher, 22 years old, absolute rookie, junior high science teacher. Her name was Virginia. And I don't interview teachers directly. The principals do that and they hire, but I had seen Virginia before school started at an in-service. And so when she wandered into my office just before school started, to fill out some forms, W-2, W-4, and all that stuff, personnel forms. I snagged her and said, come on into my office, Virginia. So she comes in, and I said, Virginia, what name do you like to be called by? She said, oh, Virginia's fine. Lots of people call me Virginia. Listen, and I said, what name do you like to be called by? She said, oh, Virginia's fine. Some people call me Jenny. Listening. It took me 4 times because she never really answered the question. She told me what other people, told me it was okay. But the 4th time she said, well, some people call me Virginia, some people call me Jenny, but you know, I really like to be called Pearl. Now, fascinating again. She said, I like to be called Pearl because that's what my family calls me. Now, interesting enough, I was at a restaurant the very next morning, and the staff had taken Virginia out for breakfast as a welcome breakfast before school started, just to say, welcome, Virginia. Very neat thing. And I was out with a couple of board members, and so I got up from where I was at and went over to where that staff was, and Virginia was seated there. And I said, good morning, Pearl, how are you doing? And she absolutely blossomed. Was I developing a relationship? Powerful stuff. When I first started teaching, I told kids they shall be called by the name on their birth certificate. This was an enlightened nuclear engineer. Took me a while to learn that that didn't always work as well as I wanted it to do, but it was a manager doing well. I wish I could tell you that wasn't a true story, but it is. What I like most about school, if you ask people that question, they'll tell you. I was in the cafeteria yesterday, ate lunch with the kids, and I saw a kid was by himself. So I went over there and sat down next to him. I said, how you doing? He said, I'm doing fine. And he had his schedule with me. I handed out in the homeroom, right? Had his schedule. So I said, let me look at your schedule. And I saw this kid was taking a couple of industrial arts courses, and also he had a drafting course, and he was in art too. I said, bet you like to draw. He said, yeah, I kind of like that a little bit. I said, I bet you're going to be good at that. He said, yeah. I said, what do you want to do with your life when you get out of school? He says, well, I like to go into construction. I said, you taking any courses in construction? He says, no. I said, why not? My mom won't pay for the tools. And he said, I can't pay the fee to get in the class. I said, is it because you don't have any money? He says, no, we have money. And so I immediately went to the counselor and said, fix this one. Fix this one. This kid was telling me, this was yesterday, what he wanted to do was be construction, and he wanted to be in the construction class. Wanted to be in the construction class. Now, I can ignore that and say, we'll be all right in industrial arts, so don't worry about it, right? No, see, he's telling me, sending a message. I don't even know whether he knew who I was, very truthfully. Some weird guy in a suit eating in the cafeteria. School's a pretty big school. You want to sit there. Usually I ask the kids, may I sit with you? They don't know quite how to handle that one. Most of the time they say yes. What I want most to accomplish in school in the next 6 months. What do you want to accomplish? You know, if we ask that of our co-workers, powerful stuff, powerful stuff. We just simply ask that of each other. What motivates me to achieve goals, to be successful? Some of you will be motivated by, you know, I want to be good so I can make more money. I just want to pay off my car loan and my student loans and my visa bill, right? There's other ones of you, well, that's not a drive at all. I've had people say, how much do you make? They'll say, I don't know, my wife gets my check. And I know if I gave that person a raise, they wouldn't even know they got a raise. But there's another person, you know, if you gave them $1 raise, they would know it, and it's very important. There's somebody that needs more time to do this, and other people don't need more time. It's different issues that motivate us. And indeed, I'm not saying what's right or wrong in terms of what motivates people. I'm saying, but if you know it. For me, it was real powerful if you'd talked to me about my mom. When I spent time with Father Silas, our disciplinarian, when he would keep me after school and do all sorts of different things, indeed, it wouldn't get me at all. Keep saying after school was just another hour to entertain for me. If the teachers didn't entertain, I entertained. I always had a platform to entertain from in school, I found. And indeed, so it never affected me. But once in a while, Father Silas would stop and say, how's your mom doing? How are things going with your mom? Absolutely would change me for a while, because he would touch that. When I was in 7th grade, so it shows you how individualization fascinating. I just can't resist. Maybe out of time, but we have a little more time. But can I share? In 7th grade, I was elected president of the 7th grade class. President of the 7th grade class. And I was told if I didn't sit still and keep my mouth shut, they would take it away from me. Now, I wanted my mom, I knew at the end of the year, the officers, they brought their parents to school for a little dinner. But I was no longer president of the 7th grade class 2 weeks later. And then these students aren't very bright. The end of 8th grade came around, and guess what? Elected president of the 8th grade class. And that lasted 2 weeks, too. They thought it worked the year before. They tried again, right? Didn't work. Didn't work the year before. That was sarcasm. Yes. Did you catch the sarcasm? I hope you did. Fascinating thing there, see, because it wasn't something that motivated me. Indeed, different people have different motivators. And you know, if you had asked people, they'll tell you. If you ask them, they'll tell you. The turning point in life, there's various turning points. In my life, I was a nuclear engineer working in a nuclear power plant. Had a 3-year fellowship, NASA fellowship, all tuition fees paid, all that good stuff to get a doctorate in nuclear engineering. Trouble is, in the evenings, I started coaching baseball in the inner city of Columbus, Ohio. And after doing that for a short period of time, I went in to see the dean and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to teach. Also, if you knew about Father Galahad and how he touched my life, I think you would know me better. Those were turning points in my life. The kind of recognition I like most. Some of you would be delighted if I brought you up front and said, let me give you an award. Meg, come up front here. I want to give you an award. And Meg would say, you ain't getting me up there, wouldn't you, Meg? That's exactly what she would say. It's fascinating. Different people don't want, other people say, get me up there. Oh, that's fine with me. Yet so often what we do, we give people the same thing the same way without asking them how they would like it done. Sometimes it's good to call home with recognition. Other times, you know, it might not be. When I'm successful, who do you want to have know it? Who do you want to have know it? I asked this of our purchasing agent in our district. I asked of all the people I work closest with these questions. And he said, I want my family to know. I want my family to know. So his office is 20 feet from mine, and when he does something especially well and I give him a drop for his bucket. What's that mean? You see, I have a bucket here all the time. And sometimes when my bucket's empty, I take my ladle and run around and dip in your bucket. But if my bucket's full, then I dip and I pour into your bucket. And indeed, if my bucket's full, then I feel very good. And so when I give him a drop for his bucket, and I have something that looks like a drop, what I do is I mail it home to him on Friday so he can open it on Saturday with his family. Keying it to the way that he says works best for him. What dreams do you have for the future? What do you want to see happen in the future? Now, it's not enough for us to simply listen. Because, you know, you say, I told him what I wanted, and then he did it a different way, right? But we also must affirm. We also must affirm. Some of us, just managers, gather data. Leaders use the data to affirm and help the people to grow. Also, there's other issues in terms of relationship building, powerful type of stuff. One of those would be, I want you to imagine you're a beginning teacher in the West-Allis, West Milwaukee schools. You're a rookie, like Virginia Pearl was, 22 years old. You're teaching next week. It's Thursday. You're teaching third period. In the middle of third period, the principal walks in, stands in the back of your room for 10 minutes, doesn't say a word and leaves. On Friday, same period, the principal comes in, stands in the back of the room again, but brought the superintendent in. Doesn't say a word. And on Monday, same period, principal comes in again with the superintendent and brings the school board chairman in. What are you thinking? What's Mona's phone number? Now, is that true story? Was that true story? Yes. Now, what I want you to catch there is, and it relates to me to a story about when I was high school principal in Kent, Ohio. I mentioned earlier we had about a cluttered room. Ken Gesford was the teacher, and he was the most phenomenal art teacher I've ever known. He was awesome. He taught incredible amount of students every day, 150 to 200, and we could have doubled the class size. I kept telling him, Ken, you got too many kids. Can we hire another art teacher? He says, this is my art program, and we don't need another teacher. And so that's a true story. We doubled the size of his classroom. But we couldn't get enough kids in there. Twice the enrollment could have been at any point in time. He was incredible individualized perception. I went in his room, but there was his door. He had a little office off his art room, and it was absolute clutter. And his room was usually cluttered, but it was always, he was always directed. And I hate to diverse, but I can't say. He used to use clay, and kids used to make things in clay. It was his clay. He bought the clay. And if they made something that related to drugs, he says, I just repressed it. So he would put it back in and start over again. The kid would come back. Oh, didn't fire that one. And so, but interesting with Ken, I saw a picture on his door, and it looked like it was a drawing class. It looked like a 4th grade piece of drawing. It was high school class. I looked at that, and I said, that looks kind of strange. And so Ken, so I said, Ken, come over here. I said, what's this, Ken, on your door? And he said, oh, he actually beamed. His eyes lit up. He got a smile. He says, isn't that great? He says, that's John. Now, John's mentally handicapped and about at the 4th grade level. But that is very good 4th grade, isn't it? Now, that's what Ken was like. Individualized perception. Now, Ken was the best teacher I've ever known. And it's interesting that one Sunday night, I was home. He lived in a different community. Like I lived, like if I lived here and he lived in Milwaukee. And so I got a call from Ken, 10 o'clock at night. He said, got to see you right away, Sunday night. Got to see you right away. I said, right away, Ken? He said, oh, absolutely, got to see you right away. I said, okay, where we meet? So we agreed to meet at a drive-in restaurant in between the two communities. And I was there, and I said, what is it, Ken? And he says, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. He says, I didn't sleep on Friday, didn't sleep on Saturday. He says, it's been a terrible weekend. I said, well, what is it? He says, well, I have to meet with the superintendent at 8 o'clock, and he's going to give me a test. He's going to give me a test. And I don't know, if I don't do well, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to get fired? Or I don't know. And I started laughing. Ken didn't like me laughing. And what happened was I knew the rest of the story. And what it was, the district was going to go through a hiring process. And they were going to hire a bunch of new teachers. And they had this, and they always had questions they asked people who were applicants. But they never had what they call look-fors. What are you looking for in the answer? Why do you want to become a teacher? That might be a question. Now, what's to look for? What do great teachers respond to that? And so they had selected certain great teachers across the country. And they were asking them the questions they were going to ask new applicants. So they could find the look-fors, the right, quote-unquote, the right responses for great teachers. But they forgot to tell Ken that he was one of the great teachers that they had appointed. And this happens a lot, that if I said that beginning teacher or the Ken had been in the district 20 years by that time. In the absence of information, people think the worst. In the absence of information, people think the worst. So keep secrets. Also, there's another one I like. You meet somebody, you see a kid and you don't like him very much. You don't like the way he looks. You don't like the way he walks. You meet a co-staff member. You don't like the way he looks or the way he talks. And what I find sometimes, I'm down on what I'm not up on. And as you get to know people better, you get to love them. Sometimes I say we even marry them. Leaders develop relationships. I call that knowledge, understanding versus knowledge. Understanding versus knowledge. Now, there's another piece here, too, about praise. If you would imagine, if you were a beginning person, if you were a teacher and someone came to you at church, snagged you before you could get to your car, and they told you what an incredible difference you made in their child. That you indeed, the child didn't even like to read, and you worked with him, and the child read better. And indeed, the child didn't get along with other kids, but you worked with him, and now he has lots of friends. And we had trouble at home, and I even had trouble with my husband. And indeed, you helped my child, and now he's a much better person. I even get along better with my husband now. And indeed, when that happens, when somebody affirms you like that, and many of you in this room had that type of impact on kids, incredible impact, and on families, and on families. When that happens, what do? Decide it's time to sell insurance? No, my hunch is you say, my God, I had that difference. I'm going to do it a lot more. Isn't that fair? You get motivated by praise. And indeed, that's so true. We tend to do what people applaud us for. Also, the difference between managers and leaders is so often managers, and I've seen this, and it says the leader is not, the teacher is not a devil's advocate, but the cheerleader. You heard that this morning from your superintendent and from Mona and from your board chairman. And indeed, those people, cheerleaders. Now, sometimes I get into, when I was in nuclear engineering, I could find a flaw. It's good luck to find flaws in nuclear reactors. Now, I could find a flaw real well. And when I started teaching, I looked for the flaw. And as I grew and understood better, I began to be a cheerleader. Praise is powerful. Some of us don't want to do praise. You see, if I praise him, then what if he screws up later, right? If I write him a nice note, he'll probably save it. And then if I have to discipline him later, he'll whip out the note, right? Remember in 1907 when you said, I was a wonderful teacher, right? Did you ever get that up here? I better not praise him because sometimes we get into that. Do you ever have parents, your own parents, who didn't do much praise? Didn't do much praise? I had a lot of that in my life. My older brothers found the flaw real well. Counterpoint, crazy making stuff. Praise is powerful stuff. It motivates. Some people say, I don't want to praise me. You'll get cocky, right? We get that too. We get that too. Praise. Find out the best in a person and tell him about it. We all need that. I have grown up on praise, and it has made me humble. It will always make the person long to deserve the praise. Praise means understanding. We are all great, fine and great fundamentally. Overestimation of one another is impossible. Learn to see the greatness and the loveliness in one another and to tell one another of it when we see it. Powerful stuff. Being back in Wisconsin always brings back warm feelings and sad feelings for me. A couple years ago when I was speaking at Carthage College at the statewide wellness conference, I spoke 2 days in a row, and the evening before and the evening before the second day, I would spend time in Wilmette, Illinois, where my father lived, and then drive back and forth. And during that time, my father was pretty sick. And this is a story that talks about my father and talks about when he died. It was the day my father died. It was a bleak, cold, and blustery day in July. In a small hospital room, I was supporting him in my arms when his eyes suddenly widened with a look of awe I had never seen before. I was certain that the angel of death had entered the room. Then my father slumped back, and I lowered his head gently onto the pillow. I closed his eyes and told my stepmother, who was seated by the bedside praying, "It's over, Mom. Dad is dead." She startled me. I would never know why these were first words to me after his death. My stepmother said, "Oh, he was so proud of you. He loved you so much." Somehow I knew from my own reaction that these words were saying something very important to me. They were like a sudden shaft of light, like a starting thought I had never before absorbed. Yet there was a definite edge of pain, as though I was going to know my father better in death than I'd ever known him in life. Later, while a doctor was verifying death, I was leaning against the wall in the far corner of the room, crying softly. A nurse came over to me and put a comforting arm around me. I couldn't talk through my tears. I wanted to tell her, I'm not crying because my father is dead. I'm crying because my father never told me he was proud of me. He never told me that he loved me. Of course, I was expected to know these things. I was expected to know the great part I played in his life, the great part I occupied in his heart. But he never told me. It's so important we tell people how much we love them. It's so important. Our co-workers in this room, my God, we work in a lonely profession at times. Sometimes I see cliques form instead of support groups. And what we need are support groups. Because no matter how much our power is, how good we are, sometimes we feel alone. And I think it's so important to touch the lives of other people in terms of telling them how good they are, how much they care to us, how much we love them. And I missed a lot of that in my life, and I certainly hope that you do that with your family, with your co-workers, with your children. Praise is powerful stuff. I like to call it catching people doing it right instead of catching them doing it wrong. Now, in terms of leadership and greatness, there's one other poem I'd like to share with you. It is taking risk. Being a leader is risk-taking. Being a leader sometimes can be lonely. And this poem symbolizes that. It's called The Dilemma. To laugh is the risk appearing a fool. To weep is the risk appearing sentimental. To reach out for another is to risk involvement. To expose feelings is to risk rejection. To place your dreams before the crowd is to risk ridicule. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To go forth in the face of overwhelming odds is to risk failure. But risks must be taken, because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he cannot learn, feel, change, grow, or love. Chained by his servitudes, he is a slave. He has forfeited his freedom. Only a person who takes risks is free. By the most prolific author of all time. Now, I'd like to do is ask you to take one further risk. And I'd like to have you sing along with me with this song.
Some say love is a river that drowns the tender reed. Some say love it is a rain
Thank you very much. Before I turn this back over to your superintendent, I'd like to have you reach underneath your seats and pull out a green sheet of paper. You probably have to stand up to get it. I guess I want to finish with, you have there, I'd like to have you take the rose off and put it on your lapel, if you would please. Take the rose off the piece of plastic and